Hi, I'm Ayurvedic fertility coach Regina, and I'm one half of the 90-Day Fertility Fix. I have a degree in neuroscience, and for the last decade, I have been a practitioner of Ayurveda, and I have helped hundreds of women restore their gut health and get into fertile bodies. In this lesson, I'm going to break down the womb-gut connection and why this is key for your fertility. I'm so excited to jump right into our topic for today, your feminine axis of fertility, or as we call it, the womb-gut connection. This framework is basically my playbook of how I was able to get pregnant naturally, even without IVF, even when I was told that it wasn't possible. It not only worked for me, it's helped women just like you restore their fertility. And by the end of this lesson, you will be clear why the things that you've done for your fertility thus far just haven't worked. I'm imagining this is new information for most of us. I'm gonna back us into the science by telling you my story because this is the story of how we discovered the womb-gut connection and became emphatic about teaching every woman who's been struggling to conceive. So first, let me take it way back. I was told I would not be able to have children in my 20s, and it changed the way I led my life for the next 17 years. With her head in a manila folder, my doctor told me I had PCOS, I was pre-diabetic, my testosterone was high, my estrogen was high, and there were a whole bunch of other markers my doctor was reading off a sheet and telling me that they were way out of whack. And when she was done reading them, she looked up at me and she said, "This isn't good. You will not be able to get pregnant like this." And with that diagnosis, which would be echoed at other appointments, those words felt like they were closing the door to me ever becoming a mama. I felt like guarding my heart meant shutting off even the idea of becoming a mother. And when I look back, that fundamentally changed me and the way I lived my life. It made me hyper independent and hyper focused on achieving a never-ending list of goals. I literally didn't even allow myself to wonder or explore or even grieve being able to have kids. I just thought it wasn't an option. But I was always worried about getting into relationships and wondering, how badly does this person want kids? And what if I couldn't give them kids? I knew I did want love, and I wondered what would happen in the long run and if I would lose out on love too. I'll tell you, as fast as those ideas would come up, I would just push them back down. But shame would come up every time I got into a relationship because I wasn't sure if I could have children. I ended up seeing several doctors who were giving me very general health advice. Eat healthier and move more. But I was already doing those things. At the time, I was a raw food vegan, running daily on the 1,200 calories I had limited myself to. I went to hot yoga multiple times a week, and I was doing all the things that I thought were healthy. But something wasn't adding up, and I knew something was off. Eventually, I met an Ayurvedic practitioner who told me that the core issue was how I was living for my body type. What became obvious in Ayurveda is that there are different body types, and we don't all need the same thing. The same food, herbs, and exercises that help someone can throw somebody else's body into disarray. It all seemed so complicated when I first started, but I decided I wanted to heal more than I wanted to stay stuck with sporadic menstrual cycles, no energy during the day, and bad sleep at night. I was so tired of being overweight and generally unhappy. So I dedicated myself to learning the wisdom in Ayurveda because of the really simple but sophisticated ways of describing the body types. And when I learned my body type, I remember getting access to the most mind-blowing relationship with myself because I was truly able to use food as medicine for my particular body. And smoothies, salads, and restriction wasn't medicine for me. 6 weeks later, I was no longer pre-diabetic. My menstrual cycle came back and became regular, and the weight melted off. My sleep went back to being solid, and I felt great. Part of the power of this experience rested in the fact that I realized if I learned the language of my body and just did what it was saying, I could be my own healer. One of the most disempowering feelings that I had during all the trips to the doctor and specialist was the feeling of sitting on a table having someone who's met you for 5 to 10 minutes tell you about you. It's kind of absurd, right? You spend your whole life with you, but how many of us are able to understand what our bodies are trying to tell us? This is why I started studying Ayurveda, and I literally became so obsessed with it that I studied with everyone in the US for years before quitting my job and moving to the Himalayas so I could get this information from the doctors and elders I apprenticed with for years. When I was in their care, they would see me often and could notice subtle changes in my body by observing me. This was super different from seeing doctors in the US. The Ayurvedic doctors were really learning my body's story. And we all have a story. What has your body been trying to tell you? Heavy menstrual cycle and painful cramps? PMS? Fibroids? You're always constipated, feel bloated after meals, tired all the time, get sick often, wake up and you're not hungry, anxiety, mentally scattered or foggy, creaky joints, hangnails, dry skin. All of these things are your body trying to tell you something. So what's your body been trying to tell you? And how long have you been living with this story? You keep hearing us say a fertile body is a healthy body, because it is. Fertility is a byproduct of good health. It's why all these fertility solutions that focus on forcing your hormones to do something that they aren't, or bypassing this issue or that issue, are still risky, because they don't address the whole you. What you don't heal shows up in your pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and even menopause. Do you know your root causes? Have you taken our fertility root cause quiz? We gotta know this, right? Don't tell me that my infertility is unexplained. What a lazy diagnosis. There is an explanation if we are willing to look closer. Or many women don't even know why they were referred to IVF. They're just told it's their only option. How do we know that what's presented as a solution is our solution? Especially when doctors aren't looking for root causes and they aren't taking your full story into account. Give me a solution that is based on my body's story and what could work for me. And that's what I want for all the women in our program. It's gotta be custom, one of one, deeply personal. So to get back to my story, the first time I really had womb-gut connection issues, I literally had been working for it by ignoring all these messages from my body for so long. And most of the bossed up but burnt out women in our program have a story like this. But let's fast forward to my 30s. I was living abroad, studying with village elders and keepers of the tradition in India, Egypt, Tunisia, and Italy. But during these travels, when my life seemed like it was on a high, my grandmother died. 6 months later, my father died. And over the course of the next year, 13 members of my family died. I came back to the States and was living alone. I started to experience autoimmune-like symptoms. A lot of food made me feel swollen. There was inflammation in my body. I had issues with my spine and back, and I just didn't feel good in my body. But grief was consuming me. I was asking myself about how to move on, especially without my dad, who had always been especially close to me. It's disorienting to lose a parent. We can lose our sense of self. One night, when I was in a liminal space of sleep, I got this message in a dream state that my ancestors needed me to prepare my womb because many needed to come back. I took this message very literally, and I started working with womb herbs I was already familiar with, like Vitex. I studied the fertility awareness method and hormone repair protocols. And as a practitioner, I knew that hormones and repairing your menstrual cycle would be at least a 3-month project. But when 3 months came and went and I saw no sign of improvement, I was distraught. I had to take a step back and see the bigger picture. It was clear there was a concurrent issue in my gut, and I was having inflammatory reactions to most foods, alcohol, and despite hiring a trainer months in, I wasn't losing weight, even with calorie restriction. I knew my metabolic issues were back, but they seemed even worse than before. In Ayurveda, all health and healing starts in the gut, so I refocused myself on this work. And in the beginning, I thought this decision to focus on gut health was a natural detour that was necessary and that I would circle back to my womb work. But as my gut health improved, my womb health also improved. This was one of those aha moments when I realized that the wisdom that all health starts and is restored in the gut is very literal. It's just that gut health is a whole lot bigger than drinking kombucha, eating sauerkraut, and taking probiotics, because originally, those things were actually making it worse. In Ayurveda, digestion actually encompasses so much more than digesting food. And digestion occurs not only in the gut, but also in the mind and in the womb, and even at a cellular level. We're talking about your ability to digest ideas, learn new things, or digest hard things that have happened to us in life. And so underlying infertility is always at some level indigestion, be it constipation, that is the backlog of undigested trauma, Or maybe your unprocessed emotions and anger about seeing other women seemingly easily get pregnant has manifested as inflammation or heartburn. There are always little signs or whispers before the body starts screaming like mine. So while I had developed a really specific gut repair protocol for myself, at the same time, I started talking to Menorah, who you all know as our somatic fertility coach and the other half of the 90-Day Fertility Fix. At the same time, she offered me some somatic sessions to help me with grief around losing my father. The somatic sessions allowed me to mentally digest the loss and make room for a new spiritual relationship with my father. It felt like years of therapy in a 90-minute session. I cried in ways that I hadn't ever allowed myself, but I also released and restored in ways that I hadn't ever either. Looking back, it was clear that my concurrent psycho-spiritual digestive issues and my inability to digest food was no coincidence. Ayurveda talks about this too. It mentions that the one thing that can throw off the whole body and the one thing that will make the body sicker quicker than anything is a ruminating, scattered mind. What is grief if it's not that? Healing those autoimmune-like symptoms meant healing my nervous system, which in Ayurveda are closely linked and very related systems. The loss of my protector was being mirrored in my own immune system, feeling like everything was a threat. The constant inflammation was my nervous system screaming, I am not safe and I'm not protected. Who was I without my dad was being mirrored in my immune system, but you all know the end of my story. I healed my gut, I processed my grief, and cared for my nervous system with all the tools we teach in the 90-Day Fertility Fix. I could literally see the work show up in my menstrual cycle. Charting my menstrual cycle, I could see all the things that we teach you how to look for in my healthy menstrual cycle. But there were other signs. I was feeling good in my body, I was feeling radiant, I was feeling rooted. And I remember after one chart that I was especially proud of, I went to my ancestral altar and told them, I have done what you asked me to do. I'm open to being a mother, and I placed an offering. And I found out on the anniversary of my dad's death that I was in fact pregnant. So this is a path I've walked myself and helped other women on their path. It's also something that took me way too long to realize that what I was actually doing for the last decade by helping women get into their healthiest bodies was really get them into their fertile bodies. My background in neuroscience and all the years of learning an Ayurvedic perspective on holistic gut health and the various womb wellness work primed me to see the role of the brain, the gut, and the womb in our fertility. So I started calling this our feminine axis of fertility. But why is no one else talking about this? Well, when you consider that less than 1% of medical research is spent on women's issues when you discount breast cancer research, and that it's only in the last few decades that human studies have even included women in research, you start to realize that women just haven't been the focus of science. We're harder to study and there's more variables. One reason we suspect that women have been left out of research studies is that women's hormones are very complex. Our brain chemistry changes by 25% every 2 weeks with each phase of your menstrual cycle. That's a lot of variance for scientific modeling, so we have been left out of modern science. These chemical changes in the body not only affect the brain, they impact our reproductive health by altering hormone levels, menstrual regularity, and influencing fertility outcomes. We are really interconnected beings. The brain-gut-womb connection may be a new concept for you, but intuitively, you do know it exists. Science has done a great job explaining the connection between our brain and our gut. We've all heard terms like, the gut is the second brain, or sayings like, I felt it in my gut, or I just had a gut feeling, or follow your gut. Studies have found that stress, anxiety, and other emotional factors can affect the gut-brain axis. And it's what male-dominated science has thought to measure and study. As a womb-bearing woman, your story is even more expansive. And this brain-gut connection extends down into your womb. The brain, gut, and womb are all talking to each other. But what does it look like for them to be talking? And what do they even talk about? The microbiota of the gut and the womb are talking using something called crosstalk, where they send chemical signals that actually alter the colony downstream. For instance, Take what we think of as womb issues. It could be PCOS, recurrent pregnancy loss, endometriosis, fibroids. All of these things have a particular profile of out of balance bacteria in the gut. And we've already mentioned that even in unexplained infertility, 80% of the time, this is correlated with massive gut dysbiosis. So it's truly not unexplained then, right? Beyond the microbiota of the gut changing, the womb and vice versa, certain bacteria can metabolize estrogen and other reproductive hormones, affecting their availability and balance within the body. So gut dysbiosis is also correlated with hormonal issues. Endocrine cells are responsible for circulating our hormones into our bloodstream, and the majority of our endocrine cells are actually found in our gut. If we were to gather up all these endocrine cells, it would cover a whole basketball court. This makes our gut the largest mass of endocrine cells in our body. So we can think of our gut as a major center of our hormones. You think that has something to do with our reproductive system? Yes, absolutely. Gut dysbiosis can trigger chronic low-grade inflammation, disrupting the delicate balance required for successful conception and pregnancy. You remember my example, inflammation, which is a huge part of my story and something I needed to address because the immune system and the nervous system are so closely related. Inflammation in the body causes stress, which basically is registered by the body as, I'm under attack. I'm not safe. We are biologically hardwired to not conceive when we are chronically under stressful conditions. That's the smart thing for the body to do. Reproduction isn't a daily essential, so our fertility is one of the first things to go when we are unwell, so the body can focus on essential functions. And unfortunately, the body doesn't discern between stress of chronic famine and job with stressful coworkers and late hours. But what do we do when most of us are living under a certain amount of chronic stress because of our jobs and the demands we face? All of these messages, from the gut microbiota to hormone signaling to immune system messaging, travel along our nervous system, literally extends from our brain to our gut into our wombs. This is your feminine axis of fertility. And unless you're working with this axis, fertility solutions are very likely missing the big picture. Science has made the connection between our brain and our gut and our womb, and our brain and our womb. But the truth is, none of this is happening in isolation. There is a brain-gut-womb connection, and they are constantly relaying information and influencing one another. And the health of your feminine axis of fertility is a direct measure of your fertility. So is it clear now? We can't just focus on womb herbs, your egg quality, and hormones. We actually have to care about your digestion and your spiritual and emotional state. We would do well to understand what our body is trying to tell us. Part of our work is psychosomatic, and we can't ignore all the emotional baggage we've been carrying around when we do this work. We have to involve our ancestors. This is literally multidimensional work that is equal parts metabolic health and metaphysics. But this is exactly what the Womb Gut Reset addresses. This is why we do this work in stages, step by step. This is why we have community. This is why we do the personal intakes and keep checking in with you, because there's levels to this ish. But we also know that any woman who finds herself attracted to this program isn't ordinary. She's extraordinary. So I want to again welcome you all to your initiation to becoming a mother. We're so proud that you decided to invest in yourself by being here. Every day won't be this type of neuroscience lesson, but we do want you to know that what we are embarking on together is science-backed but steeped in wise women traditions. And now that we've talked about what the work is to restore your womb-gut connection, in the subsequent lessons, we'll talk about how we actually restore the womb-gut connection using our signature 4-phase womb-gut reset. So let's dive in. Your baby awaits.